Hey everyone, my name is Rich, and this is Rich Talks Records, episode number 28, I think. Here we are today on this very gloomy Sunday, and which I think is perfect to kick off this two-parter, what I imagine is going to be a very long two-parter, as I had kind of alluded to I want to say a couple videos ago. But today we are going to be covering the first two of Tim Buckley's Quadrilogy of masterpieces. Yes, I know most people say tetralogy, but I like quadrilogy better as a word, and it is grammatically correct. So there we go. So in the Quadrilogy of masterpieces, we are going to be discussing 1969's two albums from 1969 and two albums from 1970. So in this episode we will be discussing Happy Sad and Blue Afternoon, and then in the next episode we will be talking about Lorca and Star Sailor. So really excited to talk about these. When I started the channel, I knew that I was going to do Tim Buckley at some point, and I feel like now is the time. Why is now the time? I think this is perfect winter music, and everything I'm going to be doing for the next few months is all going to sort of be albums that I think are kind of ultimate winter records. So Tim Buckley, it's funny because, you know, he's primarily like West Coast and very, very enmeshed in the Los Angeles music scene, and yet this is, to me, like, this really is like ultimate winter music. So and I don't, you know, and maybe we'll get into that. I don't know. I want to talk about the records for what they are, and not stick to the theme too much. But I tend to listen to these records most when after the leaves have fallen off the trees, and that's when it sounds the best to me. So anyway, I will say there are primarily two pathways to Tim Buckley fandom. One is he is either known as like Jeff Buckley's weird dad, or the other route that I've seen is through the Monkees. And I came in through the Monkees. I will be honest, back in the 90s, Jeff Buckley to me was way too much of a... I dismissed him whole cloth as a Jordan Catalano dreamboat kind of, you know, something that girls would ooh and ah over, and I didn't take it very seriously. And, you know, in retrospect, I feel bad about that, because it would have been cool to support him while he was around, you know. That being said, I think sometimes there has been a little bit of weird revisionism around him. There's one critic, I forget the guy's name, he writes for Entertainment Weekly and stuff, and used to be in a bunch of like behind the musics, and he sort of posited the theory that Jeff's music was his dad's done right. And I couldn't disagree more. But that's the one route that a lot of people take. I don't think there is a perfecting Tim's music. I think he got it right plenty on his own. I don't think it needed to be passed down a generation for it to be like done properly. Like, that's, you know, Jeff's music is what it is on its own. It like, regardless of what his dad did. So you know, that's its own thing, and I suspect that's how he would want it to be viewed. And I'm not going to focus on him too much in these videos. I'll touch on a couple things here and there, but there's, you know, as Jeff himself was the first to point out, they didn't really have any interaction with each other or crossover with each other. But the other route is the way that I came in, and that is via the Monkees. So this is the big Blu-ray limited edition set, and for anybody who remembers the debacle of this release, like, it was falling apart in transit, and sure enough, mine did. So this is the woo. Hi. So yeah, this is it. Yeah, and I tried re-gluing it, and it never. So it's a little bit of a mess. But the Monkees in season 2, because they had been such a big success, they got to call the shots a little bit more on their show, and they each got to have a musical guest come on. So Davey had his name Charlie Smalls, who he wrote. I think that's his name. I hope it is. Great songwriter who wrote some songs with Davey. Wrote some of, I think, the best Davey songs, and went on to write The Wiz. So Get On Down the Road. That would be an example of his music. I hope I'm getting his name right. Michael Nesmith had Frank Zappa on, and the famous sketch where Zappa plays Nesmith and Nesmith plays Zappa, and it's hilarious. That's out on YouTube, and a million different people have cut that up a million times. As in the studio, as on the television program, Peter never really got round to doing his part. So he was going to have Pete Seeger, and apparently he he just never even got round to filming it. Kind of in the same way that a lot of Peter's music didn't really get recorded, and he would spend 4 months on one song. So Peter never had his segment, but Mickey. In the last episode of The Monkees Ever Made, so that's here, and I never get this right. Mijikuchio? I've never gotten it right. Also known as the Frodis Caper. Aired at the beginning of '68. Mickey directed the episode, because Mickey, of course, got into television directing after The Monkees. That was when Mickey brought on his guests. So the very last episode of The Monkees ever, the last thing on the last episode is, Charlie Smalls, it's him and Davey sitting at the piano, and they're talking about the difference between soul music and rock music and white and black and all of it, and then all of it coming together, and it's a lovely kind of ebony and ivory sort of charming moment of cultures and races and music coming together to make something beautiful. Mike and Frank are two fucking smartasses in tandem, just breaking the fourth wall and fucking around in a Mike and Frank kind of way. Mickey, however, so the last thing on the last Monkees episode ever is Mickey just says, "This is Tim Buckley," via voiceover, and this shambling man comes on, and looking like some sort of weird, hybrid creation of 1966 Dylan, half 1966 Dylan, half Jim Morrison. But Jim Morrison, on Venice Beach before he was in the Doors, right? And so this guy sort of with electric hair sort of comes shambling on, and I had never heard Tim Buckley sing, and this was in the middle 2000s. I loved the Monkees as a child. I would walk to the park with my grandma every afternoon after kindergarten, and then we'd come back from the park. I would watch the Monkees, and then I would take a nap. So the Monkees were a daily fixture of my life when I was 5, 6, 7 years old in those years, right? And I loved them. And then I rediscovered them in my 20s, and just rediscovered how awesome they really were. And it stopped being kids stuff to me and started being wow, this is really fascinating, and you can approach them from all these different angles. So that's when so this would have been around 2006 or something, and this shambling guy comes on and proceeds to do Song of the Siren. And it is the performance of a lifetime. It is Nirvana, Where Did You Sleep Last Night level, a lights out ultimate performance, a where the fuck did that come from? Who is this guy? I have to become a fan. And so I got the Morning Glory compilation, which was the big one that was available at the time, and the one that you would sort of see in record stores everywhere. But that what really got me though was when I actually just started buying the albums, because Morning Glory was sort of a kind of a smattering of material, and I don't think it. I don't necessarily think that it worked as a compilation in that sense. I think that it was a little too all over the place and kind of unsure of the larger story that it was telling. So I ventured out and just started buying albums, and that was where my fandom was really and truly solidified. And I don't know that Tim Buckley's music necessarily works very well for compilations, because there are distinct phases of his work. He made, I want to say, 9 albums, and those phases crossing over each other can make for a kind of a jarring listen. What is not a jarring listen, though, are these 4, and hopefully I will contextualize all of that, in an intelligent way. I don't want to spend too much time on his early years, because I will eventually be reviewing his first 2 albums. And I will go kind of into greater detail then. But a couple sort of key facts, I guess, would be he started playing music very young. His parents were music lovers and record collectors, and he, everything from Hank Williams to Lena Horne, Johnny Mathis, blues music, and especially jazz. And Tim Buckley was very, very deep into jazz, and we will touch upon that certainly. He was a high school football player, and he injured his hand in a game, and that is why he never really got too much into playing electric guitar, and never really got too much into playing rock and roll guitar, because it was difficult for him to play, because it happened on his left hand, so it was difficult for him to sort of play rock music. So interestingly, and to me counterintuitively, as a very rudimentary guitar player, he gravitated towards playing a 12-string, and that kind of just became his signature instrument. And I guess it was easier for him to do different chordal positions, but the 12-string in a way makes complete sense, because the harmonic possibilities offered by that worked well with his voice. And speaking of his voice, Jeff told the story that apparently Tim's dad also that the voice that was carried from Tim to Jeff, and people have written a lot about that, that Jeff made the assertion that it was just the Buckley voice, and that the grandfather sang like that was just the voice that the men in the family had. And Tim discovered his voice very, very young. He would go out apparently on long bike rides. The family, he was originally born in New York, upstate New York, and then they moved to California, and he would go on long bike rides, and he would sing like Miles Davis trumpet lines while he was on his bike, but then he would also just do things like imitate car sounds and imitate barking dogs. He just would use his voice for sort of everything. And so at a very young age, he had this unbelievable 5-octave voice that he just started using. He formed 2 bands. One was sort of a rock band. They were called the Bohemians, and that was with Larry Beckett. He'll be coming up a lot. And then there was, at the same time though, he had sort of folk jazz band. He was already sort of developing in that area, called the Harlequin Three. And Larry Beckett and Tim were sort of artistic partners. And Larry Beckett was a poet, and he was, in effect, Tim's lyricist for the first two albums that he made. And they really were conjoined in a lot of ways. And like I said, I will be doing reviews of the first two albums at some point in the future. But the first album Tim made when he was just 19, and that was in 1966. And then in 1967, he made his second album, Goodbye and Hello. And there it is. And Goodbye and Hello. Oh, he was signed to Elektra Records. He was one of the big signees of Elektra Records. So you had Love, The Doors, and Tim Buckley. And Tim, as an up and coming performer, wowed and made friends with. He was good friends with Jim Morrison, but wowed and made friends with Frank Zappa and Lou Reed. So when he was in New York, Frank and Lou were both fans and became friends. And I feel like that is a great testament to his talent, because those two guys did not get along. So yeah, but the reason I mention Goodbye and Hello is because on this album, largely the first two albums are of a piece, and though this one is still a very big development past the first one, they are ultimately of a piece. However, on this album, made when Tim was 20, there is a song on here called "I Never Asked to Be Your Mountain." And that is the song where Tim Buckley, as we know him, sort of emerges out of nowhere. And the analogy that I would make is it would be like if Changes or Life on Mars was on one of those first two David Bowie albums. Like, where it's wait, what the fuck is this? And who is this guy? That happens. And so if Song of the Siren doesn't turn as performed on the Monkees doesn't turn you into a fan, I Never Asked to Be Your Mountain would turn you into a fan. Like that again is the song and performance of a lifetime. And then 1968. Oh, and that's the other thing for the context of the Monkees performance. His Song of the Siren wasn't on. This was his latest album at the time and was selling very well. That song's not on this album. It wasn't on any album. And it's a complex, deep, gorgeous, dark madrigal song. One of the greatest songs, I'm going to say, one of the greatest songs of all time. And and he just dropped it. Like he has his television debut and he just drops this song out of nowhere. And I think that is indicative of his artistic temperament. So he was gaining a reputation for himself. And again, kind of like David Bowie, at a distance, 1968 is sort of a lost year. And you would think that for both of them that they weren't really doing very much. And as posthumous releases revealed, no, David Bowie was doing a lot of woodshedding and a huge amount of artistic development. And Tim Buckley was doing a lot of woodshedding, a lot of playing live, and a lot of artistic development. And that artistic development is captured on, this originally came out in 1999 on Rhino Handmade. And this is the Works in Progress record. And I got it later as part of the Complete Albums box set. And this, there's one outtake on here from 1967, but this covers what would have been his third album. Elektra really wanted him to go in and make a third album, and he briefly capitulated. So this would have been the third album, and I'm not going to review this specifically. I'm going to probably touch on stuff on here in relation to Happy Sad. But it is, and I wouldn't say that this is essential listening. I think that if you become a fan, this is very, very, very interesting. Kind of in the way that I think that like Dylan releases are a lot of Dylan outtake stuff is essential and provides extremely vital components to the understanding of the artist, and exists on the exact same level as the released albums, and sometimes even exceeds it. I would say Prince is the same way. This is a little bit more like Beatles outtakes in that they're not necessarily essential. They're more instructive on how he got from point A to point B. And that's its own level of interest, but it's not necessarily like, essential purely in and of itself. So, and I don't want to sort of lose the focus by putting too much attention on this, you know what I mean? Because again, it's kind of like going through like the Beatles anthology or Beatles bootlegs. It's more instructive for somebody who already is a fan, or even some of the Neil Young archive stuff. Like, holy shit, if you like, On the Beach or something, you have to hear this. So, this is definitely more of a next step kind of thing. But this album didn't happen, and I think that we can all be glad that it didn't, because while it's great, and it's another huge development past Goodbye and Hello, it in and of itself is nowhere near the quantum leap of 1969's Happy Sad. This wound up being... So these sessions, one is from May 68, and I forget when the other is from, maybe September 68. This was recorded in total in... I'm sorry, September of 68. I think I said September. This was recorded in total in December of 1968. And that's the back cover. And I would have gotten this... I don't know when I would have gotten this. When the hell would I have gotten this? Who knows? Who can say? But clearly it is a later pressing, because as you can see, this would have been the Butterfly Elektra Records logo, I think, era. So I'm going to say that this is a later pressing. All right, so in December 68, Tim Buckley at Elektra Studios in LA goes in to record his third album, Happy Sad. The producer or co-producer of this album, the Lovin' Spoonful's Jerry Yester, produced most of this. And this is a very heavily produced, heavily orchestrated album that to this day still divides people. And I don't know that I've ever seen split opinions. There are people who put this on the level of Love's Forever Changes. There are people who put it on the level of Pet Sounds. And then there are people who call it mawkish and embarrassing. And a misbegotten, overproduced, post-Sgt. Pepper, what's the word? Folly, right? But that's a little absurd, especially because it, as I said, it has goddamn I Never Asked to Be Your Mountain on it, and no album with that can possibly ever be a folly. But Jerry Yester was back in the producer's seat, along with, interestingly, the person he replaced in the Lovin' Spoonful, Sal Yanofsky. Now, if you know anything about the Lovin' Spoonful, the idea of Sal Yanofsky, who was sort of the, the clown prince of folk rock, and, very comedy heavy, lots of bits, lots of shtick, lots of what the British would call gurning for the camera. It's, a great player. But it's funny to think of Sal Yanofsky, who, if you only know through photo sessions and like performances on the Ed Sullivan Show, as sort of a goofball. It's funny to think of him co-producing an album. This like very serious, and this in like with this much intensity, So, but they produced it. Apparently, Jerry Yester. I don't know what Sal Yanofsky's thoughts were, but apparently Jerry Yester quite categorically did not enjoy the making of this record because, whereas on this he had lots to do, on this he had virtually nothing to do and was essentially a glorified engineer. On here, the songs are already pretty worked out. And what's interesting is they are more song-like. The other thing is, between the two albums, Tim had told Larry Beckett, his artistic partner, that he was now going to write his own lyrics. So Larry Beckett is out of the picture at this point. He would be back in the picture fairly soon after. But at this point, he's kind of out. And Tim has assembled a band, and I want to get this right. So the personnel is Lee Underwood on guitar, John Miller on double bass, Carter C.C. Collins on congas, very important, and even more important, Dave Friedman on marimba and vibraphone. And Bruce Spotnick, the Doors engineer, is the engineer on this. So, and I think this was the third Tim Buckley album in a row he had worked on. So he had been around since the beginning. But yeah, Lee Underwood and Dave Friedman, holy crap, amazing. So what is more sort of singer-songwritery on here and has more delineated songwriterly sections. In the months from this to this, Tim has now sort of started pursuing his own genre, and I suppose I need to talk about that a little bit. So, Tim Buckley, to me, is, and I've talked about this in relation to the Love albums, that Love Forever Changes is one extrapolation of what Dylan innovated with when he made Blonde on Blonde. I would say this is another extrapolation of that. It takes that sort of that sort of hand painted modernist orchestral music idea into a completely different direction, and Tim Buckley was in fact influenced by Bob Dylan. There is definitely a Dylan influence, but even more so, there is a Miles Davis influence, and Miles is all over this. People have tied Tim Buckley into. There also, I think, is, just because they were direct colleagues, I think there is some crossover with the Doors in terms of open-ended, evolving song structures, a lot of improvisation, a lot of everybody having to listen to each other. The Doors didn't necessarily blast you away with volume. There is a quietude and there are subtleties to a lot of what the Doors did, and that is very much an aspect of Tim Buckley's music. But people have tied him into other folk singers. In particular, one of his big influences was the great Fred Neil, who wrote Everybody's Talkin' and The Other Side of This Life. I went and listened to Fred Neil, and I sort of hear it, but I also don't hear it, because I feel like, and I've talked about this before, the difference between guys who came sort of out of the late 50s or earlier part of the 60s versus actual 60s people. There is a solidity and sense of formality to Fred Neil. His music is great. He has a great fucking voice. But that is, Tim goes off and deals in abstractions and open-endedness in a way and subtext in a way that Fred Neil really kind of wouldn't have touched. I really do believe and part of this is because of the vibraphone and marimba. The singer that the music to me that Tim Buckley, what he innovated most resembles is this Johnny Ace. And if you've ever listened to Johnny Ace, I almost made Johnny Ace my second video after Lou Reed. There will be a Johnny Ace video at some point. I'm a very big fan. I think very highly of him. But the thing with Tim Buckley, and there wasn't, as I always said, there wasn't much rock and roll to Tim Buckley, is there is not really a sense of catharsis. And John Lennon, I always felt like his voice bore the weight of his emotions, but then there is there's your twist and shouts, there's your happiness is a warm guns, there's Cold Turkey, there's the whole of the Plastic Ono Band album, there's a few songs here and there after that, including I'm Losing You or Serve Yourself, where there is a sense of catharsis, there is a sense of relief. Iggy Pop has that, that this has boiled, and now it is coming out. You have that all throughout soul singers like Otis Redding. The thing that is the weird power and intensity of Johnny Ace is that there is no catharsis. It is just carried with. And everything in the voice at the beginning of the song or at the beginning of the record is still there at the end. Nothing has been expelled. Nothing has been expunged. It's the anti Henry Rollins. It's the anti James Brown even, or the anti Wilson Pickett. It's ruminative, and a lot of the intensity is quiet and inward. Maybe another person you could compare this to would be Marvin Gaye. That, If I Should Die Tonight doesn't lead to like a sense of relief or release. That he's just sort of back in it. And that is between the quiet intensity of and the heavy emotions bearing down on the soul in the voice carries over to Happy Sad. So that, if you've ever listened to Johnny Ace, and you should, that actually to me would be the direct comparison. And I don't know if he was a fan of Johnny Ace, I have no idea, but just in terms of my listening, that is what I relate it to. So let us get into talking about the album. I didn't sort of finish my thoughts on the genre, for fuck's sake. I just think that what Tim Buckley did was he sort of used the tools of folk music or singer-songwriter, whatever, but primarily became a jazz artist. So, there's a classical formality to the songs on the first two albums, or the majority of the songs on the first two albums, and they're dealing in established forms. They're dealing, like it would be, like dealing with sonnets and iambic pentameter, and then all of that starts to conjoin and merge and thusly sort of ebb away. And that would have been the story of this album, of those things really converging. But by the time this was made, just a few months later, that it had already sort of started to ebb away. So this is the interesting missing link in all of that, but it's that much more dramatic to go from here to there. So, and that much more compelling, I think, as a listener. So, there's not really anything else you can compare him to. He is not especially with Larry Beckett out of the mix, he is not anywhere near as, he's not as writerly as Bob Dylan. He's not as not as tight or as formalist as Neil Young is. His guitar playing with the 12 string and acoustic is far more open ended, and this really is some sort of genre unto its own that sometimes mirrors pop music or other jazz vocalists or rock music or folk music or whatever. It's built out of some of those things. I mean, he does a beautiful version of Wayfaring Stranger on here, but really this is its own genre, and it is unlike anything else. And I think that's why it's sort of hard to make too many direct comparisons, because so we might as well just get into it. So the album begins with a 7-minute. I mean, it throws down the gauntlet right away, and all of this was written by Tim solo. So it opens with near 8-minute, 7 and a bit minutes of Strange Feeling, and so so first of all, it appears that. I always thought that it sounded to me like that the chords sounded like Miles Davis's "So What" backwards, slowed down and backwards. But apparently, it's based off of a different song on that record, All Blues. So I read that somewhere. So I thought that was funny because I always related it to "So What," but throws down the gauntlet early. It is. And this is all, I should say, this album, with one exception, is really not produced in any sense. This is the sound of the musicians live in the room and all truly playing off of each other. This is to use the analogy I always like to use, this is a painting or a series of paintings. This is a photograph. To put it in. Well, no, we'll save that for another day. I'll save that comparison for another day. So this is just live on the floor of the studio. This is as they played it in the moment. This is all of them listening to each other and as one entity. So Strange Feeling is, to borrow the Angelo Badalamenti phrase of when talking about making music for David Lynch, it's so slow it's backwards. Languorous vibraphone, and I'm not necessarily sure sometimes what's vibraphone and what's marimba. I know that the vibraphone is plugged in. I'm going to use those probably interchangeably. Forgive me if I say one instead of the other. We'll just deal with it, right? So languorous, long, very slow, very, very, very beautiful. Tim uses his voice to gorgeous effect. And the lyrics are, I don't want to say superfluous, but the lyrics are far more for their sound than literal meaning or literal scanning. And just, they feel as, even though they're probably pretty minimal if you were to write them out on the page, they feel as expansive as the music. And the music just goes everywhere that it needs to go. It wanders around in its own totally wide open space with a logic totally unto itself. And really it is about that vibraphone and voice. And that's the marriage that makes this song so beautiful, and it describes the strange feeling, which I think that we've all had. So probably not a million miles in some ways from the crazy feeling on Lou Reed's Coney Island Baby, but you get the sense of Tim's dark, haunted, stunning, fucking instrument of God fucking voice. Like one of the most unbelievable voices ever. And so it's a beautiful, quiet, pensive opening that really sets the stage for the rest of the album, for the rest of this masterpiece, the first of these masterpieces, right? So then we get to the second song. And the second song is the next one that I will really highlight, along with I Never Asked to Be Your Mountain, or the Monkees' performance of Song of the Siren. You'll see later in the next video, you see why I keep specifically saying the Monkees' performance of Song of the Siren. And that is Buzzing Fly. I will just say from the off, out of all of the music that I have, and all the music on the other side of this room, and all the hours of my life that I've spent listening to music, Buzzing Fly is maybe like one of my 10 favorite songs ever. So I kind of want to establish that from the beginning. How long is it? It's 6 minutes. So I discovered it on the Morning Glory compilation. That was my first exposure to it. And it just starts with a beautiful opening guitar figure. There's a couple earlier takes on here. They're great. They're interesting. Again, very instructive. But I almost don't want to know. I want to hear the perfection that is this, because this is the ultimate realization. And it opens with that beautiful little modest guitar figure, and the rest of the band comes in, and the lyrics are a little all over the place. The lyrics are emotionally of several minds at once, and the text of the lyric really does shift from devotional to infatuated to already out the door, but it just keeps revolving around itself. It's an emotional Mobius strip, and it builds to these incredible peaks, especially given that this is not like heavy electric music. There's not a drum set, like there's nobody like bashing away, and yet it feels like some sort of ultimate. To me, it goes into the same hyper orchestral space that mid-period Boredoms or later period Swans goes into, where you feel that it feels like power of flight. It feels like you are up there looking over the tops of mountains somehow. It is just an absolutely stunning piece of music. And Tim's voice and the recurring, forget about the lyrics, just treating the voice purely as an instrument. If it was wordless and he was just intoning, the repeated cycles and themes that he goes back to and uses that as further launching off points for this unbelievable, glorious, sonorous, fucking perfect instrument that this guy has. He's 22 years old. He's the master of this nascent genre that he has created, based around the soaring perfection of what he has, what he possesses. He sounds like the greatest singer that has ever lived. Jesus Christ. I have struggled to, there has been a thing for me of how am I going to talk about this? Because I don't know that I can convey it. It's harder to talk about music you love than music that you dislike, because you can needle it and pick it apart and say, oh, and this is terrible. Something that you love and something that you are enthralled by is that much harder to capture, especially without just fucking listening to it, So, and that's the thing, this is such a song of being infatuated with somebody, being adoring someone, and wanting to exalt them and just revel in the beauty. And in a way, it is about the spirituality of beauty. And it is, it to me, it exemplifies, it captures every feeling or every facet you have about the infatuation just when you are absolutely utterly fascinated by somebody, and they have sort of taken over your brain and taken over your spirit, and it goes beyond that. It's not like lust. It's not there is a weird spiritual component to it, and it almost hurts to look at them, or it almost hurts to talk to them, and like having like 6-hour conversations with that person, because when he says like, I want to know everything about you, like I want to know, like it is one of the greatest portraits in song ever created, and truly, like, just, it's not like, even saying song feels like it's limiting it. It's music. It's just like the fucking music of nature. It is expansive and unbelievable. Like, listen to Buzzing Fly. Like, I don't I don't know that it gets better. And fuck, I truly, I know I've said this about other songs before, I can do 30-40 minutes on just that song easily. It is perfection, and he seemed to know it too, because he mentioned it. He singled that song out in a few specific interviews as being like a high point of his, and it is. So and so then we have, and I always mangle the title of this, so I'm just gonna bloody read it. The third song, the near 11-minute, Love from Room 109 at the Islander, brackets, on Pacific Coast Highway. So, I'm going to say that this is some people would say that this is two songs conjoined. I consider it a triptych. And it's born out of two songs on here, Da Nang and Ashbury Park. And there's a few versions of Ashbury Park on here. I consider it, like I said, a triptych. This is the song that took me the longest to understand or come to fully grasp. I understood that it was a major work. I understood that it was great. But to really, really, really fully get it, it is the continuation of the songwriting style of the title track of this album. But it really is the grand, beautiful epic. Oh, one other thing. God damn it, man. God damn it, almost forgot, and I would really hate it. Lee Underwood's guitar playing on Buzzing Fly is the secret genius. That is, it really is a duet. The way that I would put it about Lee Underwood's guitar playing on Buzzin' Fly, because it's all beautiful counterpoints and counter melodies, and he's just throwing like one perfect idea after another out at you. The way that I would put it is, what Tim is doing on that song is fucking Saturn, and Lee Underwood are the rings around it. So I'm so glad I remembered to say that. Now back to the Love at the Room 109. I never get it right. So this is where the marimba vibraphone. This is even slower and more backwards feeling than Strange Feeling, and it starts off as sort of a beautiful, sort of madrigal ballad, and there is the sound of the ocean that Jerry Yester put in. It's what I referenced before. This is one piece of production. Why was there this one piece of production on here? Well, because there was an error with the tape, and there was a hissing that was coming in, and the band had recorded this. They recorded it as one big piece, and they understood that they had the take, but yet there was this thing happening. So they simply mixed in the flaw in the canvas became the canvas brilliantly, and they mixed in the sound of the waves of the ocean. Perfect. Brilliant. So, and Jerry Yester, didn't like, so the other thing I'm mentioning, I already said that this is very live in the room. Part of that, too, is Tim was only allowing a couple takes of songs. He wanted to really keep it live, keep it open-ended, keep it flowing. Just keep it happening, and it's musical. So it's not even, like I said, it's not even really about songs. It's about music. It's about the cumulative effect, and the songwriting is just simply one aspect of the gestalt of the fucking magnificence of the genre that this guy is creating, and the moods, the complicated moods that are being sustained. So the three parts of it. It becomes more abstracted with each piece. You could argue it's two pieces. I feel like it's three. And it, the band listening to each other, and the quiet intensity. Tim doesn't go for volume. There's not histrionics, and there's not the flights of the flights of virtuosic beauty of Buzzing Fly. This is some of the most quiet, ruminative music I've ever heard. It's almost as if the silence is the thundering volume, the silence is the thundering intensity, and it is Wagnerian silence, and it is Wagnerian intensity, but boiled all the way down, and it is an absolutely incredible achievement, and a beautiful way to finish off this stunning, otherworldly side of music. So then we flip the record over. All right, so we flip the record over, and the first song on side 2 is a little over 5 minutes, and it is called Dream Letter. And so I've touched upon Tim Buckley's son Jeff, and so I forget the mom's name now. I do apologize, but they were married very, very young. Jeff was a surprise, and I think there had been a serious, or I guess like a phantom pregnancy, and then Jeff was born soon after that. So Tim Buckley was very young guy. They're both kids, and they divorced. It apparently happened over a sort of a longer period of time, but that's what is chronicled. That's the emotional underpinning of "I Never Asked to Be Your Mountain," and so Tim Buckley, in effect, the Faustian bargain that he made, the pain that he carried, the hellhound on his trail, if you will, if you want to put it in Robert Johnson terminology, is that he abandoned what would have been his young family, and left his child behind. So that apparently weighed heavily on him at various times, and in interviews, he had a very well-developed social conscience. He was a very, very smart guy, and I think the guilt is real, and I don't know what the ins and outs of that relationship with the mom was, but I think there was a lot of regret on his end. On the other hand, how good of a father would he have been? Tim apparently was the subject of a lot of physical abuse. His dad had fought. Would that have been World War II, I guess? His dad had a certain amount of shell shock and was physically abusive. And I just don't think that he probably wouldn't have been a great dad if he was at home. But either way, I think that he suffered under that, with whatever his choice would have been. So at any rate, I say all of that. And I don't like to get into this sort of stuff on my videos, as I've established before. I don't like the TMZ-ification of artists, and I don't like reducing people to the things that are that they did wrong, or whatever their human failings are. All humans have failings, and nobody gets to the other side without fucking something up or causing some sort of wake. And I think that the world that we live in now, if your failings are entirely inward and self-directed, you're almost a venerated, creature as a result of that, or you're treated with kind of infinite levels of empathy. And no matter how much sort of pain you caused in your own implosion, no matter how much pain you caused around you in that, but if anything is outwardly directed, then that is then the only thing about, for some people, that is the only thing about you that matters, and everything is reduced down into that. And I've seen, I think we all have, I've seen some really, really, really utterly baffling, essays and articles espousing that as an idea. And I just think it is inhuman and absolutely and utterly wrong. And to do that to artists, to sort of mute the artistic voice and to amplify the failings, the human failings of somebody, the art is what can ultimately help people, and the action and inspiration is ultimately the thing that goes, and I think transcends whatever human failings, and I think is a vital tool for keeping humanity up and running, and keeping society and culture up and running. And so it's just not something that I like to focus on. And and I don't believe in reducing people to, unless something's like really egregious. I don't like reducing people to the worst decisions they made or their biggest mistakes along the way. I just don't believe in that. And I don't think anything's going to convince me that that's a good idea at this point. I have yet to hear an argument that does convince me. So, my parents stayed together. I don't have any sensitivities on this subject. You may feel differently about that. I get it if you do. There's a million situations out there. People have all sorts of horrible things happen, and obviously nobody deserves that, and nobody deserves the weird shit step parent or any of the different things that can play out. Obviously nobody deserves that. So I'm not trying to gloss over that, but I also think one of the reasons I love Lou Reed so much is the song Stupid Man on the Bells. It's easy to sing about the poor orphans, right? What Lou Reed does, and the reason why Lou Reed is such a tremendous artist as far as I'm concerned, one of the many things, is Stupid Man is about the failings of the dad. It's about the poor sort of middle-age crisis of and the utter quagmire of the spirit of this guy, as he knows he's careening out of control. He doesn't know how, so I think it's tougher. I think artistically it's tougher and more challenging to sing the song of the poor lousy father. That's a more interesting artistic choice to me anyway than to sing about the poor orphan. The poor orphan is a given, So at any rate, so Dream Letter Open Side 2. I say all of that because Dream Letter is a letter, sort of open letter in song from Tim to his ex-wife and to what would be 2-year-old or 3-year-old Jeff. Given that they really did never have a relationship, and then I think Tim Buckley died when Jeff would have been 9, 8 or 9, and they only met the couple times. It's that much sadder. It's the opposite. It's sort of the shadow realm version of John Lennon's Beautiful Boy that gains all this sort of I mean, I love Beautiful Boy purely on its own terms, but it gains all this weird extra pathos as a result of if you happen to know the life circumstances. It's that much more tragic and heartbreaking. It is I think it is an absolutely beautiful song. I think that I don't think that it's self justification. You can read a certain amount of self justification, and as magnificent as I Never Asked to Be Your Mountain is, you can read a certain amount of self justification into that. But you can also read it as a much larger or less specific statement on how humans go forward with each other or choose not to. Whereas this is really, really specific and just absolutely sad and wrenching. And it, again, what's interesting is Tim doesn't go for histrionics. If Dream Letter is sort of a duet between Tim and Dave Friedman, and Buzz and Fly is something of a duet between Tim and Lee Underwood. This is sort of a duet between Tim and John Miller on double bass. John Miller is great on this album, but he doesn't necessarily step to the fore as much as Lee Underwood or Friedman do. So his playing sort of the anchor of it, it just adds undercurrents of more sadness and darkness. And it's an incredible song, a beautiful song, a pensive masterpiece. And like I said, again, there is, like Johnny Ace before him, there isn't a catharsis. He's sort of staring down the hallway of himself, and he's not sure what's at the end. And tragic song. And there were no children involved, thank God Almighty, but having gone through a divorce and the weird pain of all of that, and the second guessing that you do, and again, he was 22 years old. That's the other reason I hesitate to go too hard on this, because 22 years old, think about what you were like at 22. I know what I was like. I was a fucking lunatic. So, I made one god awful decision after another when I was 22. I mean, it was a fucking banquet of terrible decisions, one after another. During the pandemic, fucking spent about a 6-week run going through the series of decisions from when I was 22 to 25 or so that, wound up kind of nearly killing me in my mid-30s. So, yeah, we make terrible decisions in life, and I think you have to have some fucking understanding of all of that. And he doesn't let himself off the hook. It's, there's just sadness and uncertainty, and that is portrayed in song and performance. It's a beautiful song. And I really no disrespect to no disrespect to Larry Beckett, but Larry Beckett couldn't have written this. Truly couldn't have written this. I think Beckett, I could see him writing Love from Room 109. I could see him maybe doing a draft of Strange Feeling. Buzz and Fly is way too open-ended for him, and someone who was as formalist and self-consciously poetic as him, and wrote some, phenomenal lyrics on the first two albums, and later on, as we'll get to. But this had to come from Tim. I don't think that I think Beckett there would have been too much of a literary remove, so yeah, phenomenal song. The next song, however, we shift moods radically, and we take a bold look into the future, and this is really and it's Gypsy Woman, the longest song on the album, the big expansive epic. This is the song where the band really, I mean, it's almost, they are almost like a somewhere between like a raga jazz music being like a really intense unamplified rock band. Like they are basically a rock and roll band, except they're all unamplified. It is this, again, this genre unto itself. The lyric is extremely sparse, extremely kind of simple, and wholly expansive. And this is a showcase for Carter, C.C. Collins, and Lee Underwood. Lee Underwood plays his ass off, but Collins on the congas is truly just fucking going for it. And this is where we really, and this will play out over the next 3 albums, this is where Tim Buckley pushes his voice into wild extremes. This is before, the only other singer that I know that pushed this far, I mean, you could look at James Brown, or you could look at Wilson Pickett, like I Found a Love or something like that. But this is where, I mean, Yoko Ono would have just, well, you wouldn't even have heard Yoko screaming by this point. December of '68, there was 2 Virgins, and there was her stuff on, her little moments on the White Album. So this is like, Yoko Ono hadn't even started going off. So Kathy Waters, or is it Waters or Walters, the lady who sang "Black is the Color of My True Love's Hair," that's the only other vocal that I know of before this that is that extreme and that much of purely using the voice as an instrument outside of a jazz context. Oh my God! Maybe like I said, the high notes that Wilson Pickett hits at the end of "I Found a Love," you could maybe point to, but this is, and other or crooners or jazz singers. This is, this isn't like scat singing or something. I mean, this is like purposely pushing your voice to some like otherworldly extreme end and just using it as a free instrument, using the voice the way Pharoah Sanders would use his saxophone, as just like all fucking fury of the world coming through it. It is mesmerizing. And part of what's mesmerizing is if they were just fucking going for it for 12 minutes, that would be one thing. But the fact that like it slows down and like the lava actually starts to cool and then it starts to build, but even when it builds, it's like more rickety and jagged and like it is a mesmerizing performance. I have to imagine this was a big influence on Robert Plant. That I feel like Plant was sort of doing this then, like a few months later, like over a rock band. I know that he was a fan of Tim Buckley. This would have coincided right around the time of the first Zeppelin album coming out. I know they both were recorded in '68, I believe, but like at the end of '68. But Plant, like, interestingly, is in somewhat similar territory, but Plant was still more melodic and would still rein it in. This is untethered and vicious and wild and free and exploratory and utterly fucking fearless, and utterly fearless of where it is going to land. He is doing what with his voice the way the Doors would improvise. Like, who knows how it's gonna, like, how the ship is gonna right itself, and or some of Hendrix's stuff. Hendrix maybe is a good comparison as well. But just absolutely phenomenal, and again, totally hypnotic and mesmerizing, and should absolutely be every single one of its 12 minutes, And then the album ends after the fucking explosion, after the pained ruminations of the first song, and then the explosion of musical and vocal freedom of Gypsy Woman. It ends with the most singer-songwriterly song on the album, what some people consider a sort of a throwback to something off of the first 2 albums. But the thing is, while this could have fit, Tim mixed and matched songs all the time, and we'll get into that as we talk about some of the other albums. So, I think he knew exactly what he was doing in terms of sequencing. I think he was a master in terms of creating these full album experiences. Again, as I've talked about with other records, albums that play as novels or movies and are complete, sort of perfect whole statements unto themselves, and that's Sing a Song for You. And it's, I wouldn't be surprised if Beckett had co-written this, but no, this is Tim, autonomous songwriter, writing an absolutely gorgeous ballad. This could be a jazz ballad. It could have been a jazz ballad from the 40s. It could be like, you could take this in a million different directions. It's such a well-written song. And yes, it doesn't explore the outer possibilities. Friedman's marimba on Gypsy Woman. He plays marimba on that. That's fucking amazing. But the vibraphone is back on here. It ties the whole record together. It is the linchpin of the record in a lot of ways, other than the voice. But this just as a band, the Collins, Underwood, Friedman, like that, just as a trade-off, as a unit, as they all complement each other, is absolutely mesmerizing. And so Sing a Song for You is the closest that this album comes to something formalist, but it's still it fits, and it's a perfect ending. I don't think it would have fit anywhere else on the record, really, and I think that it is the perfect way to end this absolutely tremendous masterpiece. And beautiful lyrics, beautiful melody, beautiful voice. As much as I love the wild, raucous, throat-shredding exploration, the quietude and the intensity, the quiet is just as loud as the loud stuff. It's just as intense. And that is, all the shadow and light, the full spectrum, the full range, and in that sense, it's like classical music. It's the full range, and magnificent, an utterly magnificent masterpiece. But as far as making albums in 1969 goes, Tim Buckley wasn't done yet. What comes next? We'll find out. And I meant to show this. This is the Morning Glory compilation that I was referencing earlier that I would have bought way back when. So Happy Sad came out in April of '69, and somewhere in there, so Tim Buckley was very much kind of a darling of Elektra Records. They thought that they were really, because you're a good-looking guy with a great voice. It's the classic formula. They didn't realize that he had an artistic temperament, that he was in some ways even more severe than both Jim Morrison and Arthur Lee. Think about that. That you have these three guys that are these geniuses that are monumentally difficult. Like, in that sense, Jack Holtzman couldn't win, So anyway, Goodbye and Hello sold well. Happy Sad was the biggest selling album of Tim Buckley's career. He was doing really well. He was a concert draw. He was doing great. And but Jack Holtzman sold Elektra Records. And Tim Buckley was really, I think he felt he was part of the sort of Elektra family, that he could make the records that he needed to make, and he had the creative freedom, and I think it really was. There's a quote of his that when you saw an Elektra album in the racks, that you could trust it, that it was a label you could trust. So I think that Jack Holtzman selling the label was really sort of threw him into chaos. So Tim Buckley also at the same time was creating this musical genre that's sort of entirely of his own making. And he was really kicking into high gear creatively, and the songs were coming fast, and so he had connected with the Zappa crew way early on, and like I said, he had Frank Zappa was a fan, and so he was in good with Zappa's manager Herb Cohen, who and Zappa had formed the two labels Straight and Bizarre. I will take a moment to say, if you have never, I believe it's on Amazon, but parts of it are from the legendary Trouble Clef channel. At least parts of it are up on YouTube. If you have never seen the From Straight to Bizarre documentary, I cannot recommend it enough. It's from the Under Review series. It's probably the single best thing that ever came out of that. They talk the first two Alice Cooper records, the GTOs, Wild Man Fisher, Captain spent a lot of time on Captain Beefheart. Really, really, really cool. It's a really cool documentary and just hugely informative and just an interesting look at kind of like the other side of the '60s, And so, so Tim Buckley, like I said, was in good with Herb Cohen and got signed to Straight Records. So, so he recorded the follow. So in September of 1969, a few months after the release of Happy Sad, he just goes in and is recording. And what is the name of the studio? Damn it. I forget the name of the studio that he used. It's in California. It's Whitney Studios in Glendale. And he recorded in September of '69, he recorded this album, the follow-up, Blue Afternoon. He recorded a portion of the next album, Lorca, and apparently, according to Tim Buckley from a 1974 interview, a few things on the album after that, Star Sailor. So we've now touched upon all 4 albums in the quadrilogy of masterpieces. Hooray, hooray. So anyway, so this was recorded in September of '69 and released at the end of November of '69. So the stuff, like I said, it's coming hard and fast. Jerry Yester, after not enjoying the process of making making Happy Sad, is out the door forevermore, and Tim is now engineering himself, and because this is not an Elektra project, Dick Kunk is the engineer. Dick Kunk worked on a ton of Zappa stuff. He did a lot of the GTOs. He did at least the first Alice Cooper record. I don't know about the second. And the lineup, but Tim is producing himself. Again, he wrote all the songs, and the lineup is the same, except they add Steve Kahn plays guitar in 2 songs, and they add a guy by the name of Jimmy Madison on drums. But otherwise, it's all the same players as on Happy Sad, because when you are creating a genre of music with people, you don't want to interrupt the chemistry too much. You don't want to tip the balance. So Blue Afternoon is often talked about as a sort of a weaker follow-up. This is from the complete album set that I bought. I've never seen a vinyl copy of this. And legendarily, the albums on Straight and Bizarre were out of print for a very, very, very long time. And there were all sorts of licensing issues, and some of those records still have never seen the light of day. The Beefheart stuff finally did. But it's been in these kind of like licensing deal box sets that some of that stuff has had to come out. So this is the only copy that I've ever seen. So this came in the complete albums box set. But this is often talked about as sort of of the 4 masterpieces, this is often considered the least work and kind of a step down or a retrenchment from Happy Sad. I wildly, wildly, wildly disagree. One of the things is because it has some older songs on it. There's older songs on almost all his fucking records. Tim Buckley operated similarly to the Rolling Stones or Prince and Neil Young. He didn't write, record, release in a linear fashion. So the idea that that's sort of held against it is absolutely utterly ludicrous to me. It's stupid. So I kind of hate that. So this is a I think a both more song based than this album, and yet more farther out than this album. It manages to successfully go in both directions at the same time, and I think that if this record isn't necessarily for you, as much of a masterpiece as this might be the one, because it is more melodically fluid. The songs are a little bit more clearly defined, and it doesn't necessarily have as much in the way of outsized ambition as this album does. And but there's just tremendous beauty on this album. So let us get into side one. So the album starts off with Happy Time, and it's one of my favorite things. I love when great songwriters can write songs about music and about the process or the effect of music. So, and Happy Time is one of the older songs. It is on here, so it dates back to at least this period, and it's just, first of all, Steve Kahn's guitar playing on here is awesome. He does some really nice, subtle, sort of constant lead work. But it's very much the sound of Happy Sad, because these guys are just recording straight. It's all on this. There's not really overdubs. There's not a lot of editing. Like these are very naturalistic performances. This is very natural, flowing, beautiful music. This is drinking straight out of the stream or the river, and it all feels very, very, very logical and intuitive, and it's just gorgeous. So Happy Time, there are all sorts of undercurrents because it's Tim Buckley, so there's nothing totally on the surface. So even when he does something as standard as an octave jump at the end of the song, it's more of an emotional shift than or an emotional unilateral move as opposed to something that is obvious, and it's a beautiful, very, very simple lyric and an absolutely gorgeous song. So I fucking love it. The next song is where things get, and none of these songs on side one, I mean, these are all sort of 4 or 5 minute-ish songs. There aren't really the epics that are on the last album. But Chase the Blues Away. And this is where we really get into the next development. I mean, this is where things take another huge step forward in this genre that this man is creating and developing with nearly every song. Chase the Blues Away is somewhere between jazz and blues, and it somehow splits the psychic difference between those two things, like a Lonnie Johnson, or it is somehow both. It was Lonnie Johnson a jazz singer or a blues singer? I don't know. Was Jimmy Scott a jazz singer or a blues singer? I don't know. And so it splits the difference, and it is a quietly undulating, quietly seductive, but seductive and powerful. And the bass on here, by John Miller, because he also plays, he's not doing the double bass, it's just acoustic and electric bass. That's fucking amazing, and dexterous and beautiful. And there is this, like I said, there's a dark, sensuous underpinning to it, and it's the sulfur cloud of Chase the Blues Away for a while, because again, there's not catharsis with Tim Buckley. You are just in this guy's world, and it's a very, very, very emotionally intense world, and an absolutely incredible song. Again, I think in a lot of ways, one probably should start with this album. I actually, when I was really, really delving into Tim Buckley several years ago, Blue Afternoon was the album that I really like connected with the most, and then I got into the Wilder stuff. So the next song is "I Must Have Been Blind," and this is where Jimmy Madison's drums really come forward, and he on the next two songs on side one. "Must Have Been Blind" is the halfway point between the emotional realms of "Happy Time" and "Chase the Blues Away," and there is not necessarily a sense of deliverance, but there is a sense of having seen the day break, and another like melodically beautiful, gorgeous song, gorgeous singing, and there is some sense of at least temporary reprieve from the darkness. And the Hellhounds on the trail of this album are very real and barely being kept at bay. And the sort of, I don't know, pre-Rain Song-esque rolling drumming and cymbal splashes. This is absolutely beautiful fucking oceanic fucking music, oceanic in its expanse. And as much as you're sort of given to longer song forms during this period, the fact that they get this in under 4 minutes is incredible, because this could easily be 8 or 9 minutes in anybody else's hands, but they managed to convey all of that. So it's a weird cousin almost to the Stooges' "Gimme Danger" in a really weird way. "Kiss Me Like the Ocean Breeze," sort of. It's a weird, I don't know. It's a weird unplugged version of somewhere between the Stooges and Led Zeppelin, except like really sophisticated with like this unbelievable fucking singer over the top of it. And then we get to like one of the greatest songs like ever written, I think, and that is "The River," which is even, funnily enough, even more oceanic. And "The River," like, it's probably the most developed lyric. It's a beautiful lyric. There are amazing images in it, amazing sort of statements of self, or statements of purpose. But again, that roiling sense coming from the drums, and then the band just sort of playing with the rest of it, off of the rest of that, and off of the rest of those dynamics. And I think that it is, it's just under 6 minutes. It's an absolute epic. Friedman on the marimba is, oh my god, he does some absolutely beautiful marimba work on it. I'm sorry, vibraphone. It's clearly vibraphone, duh. Just absolutely fucking stunning. I mean, I don't even know what you can really say about it. It is a magnificent song, one of his greatest. And this album, I mean, like I said, it doesn't have the outsized ambitions, but it turns the outsized ambitions of Happy Sad into this, like, into just these beautifully written songs. And I think it's a huge development. I think it is, and it's an album that you want to play over and over again. It's an album you want to live inside the world of this album. You want to live inside the world. You want to live inside that album cover. You want to live inside the bottom stretch of the gatefold. Beautiful stuff. Incredible. So that's side one, and then we flip the record over. Side two of Blue Afternoon begins in an interesting way. It's sort of a answer song to Happy Time, because it's the side opener again with Steve Kahn on guitar, who plays. So this is, and also sort of a also an echo of Chase the Blues Away, because this is. So Lonely is definitely a blues, and Khan is playing sort of more conventional kind of blues licks. It's the most conventional song on the record, and but it's cool to hear, especially in this period, Tim tackle that, and especially vocally, the fact that he can, and the fact that he can do some of the vocal jumps that he does, are absolutely beautiful. The lyric is just sort of idiosyncratic enough to keep it from really actually feeling conventional. And again, it helps tie the record together thematically and musically, and it's kind of, unless you were going to swap it out with Happy Time, it is the best side opener that I think you could get, for a side two, especially where side two goes. I think you need to kind of ease in, especially because you have had the sort of the still, what is it? It's normally an epic is also an epic in length, but I think that Chase the Blues Away and The River, I mean, those are epics, except they're just not epic in length. But they cover, they cover so much ground, so you need something a little bit more concise and something to ground the album. So I think it's a perfect choice of a side opener. And again, I think Khan's playing is absolutely perfect for the song. But then, any sort of hint of conventionality is out the door, and we get Cafe. Cafe is easily one of Tim Buckley's greatest songs. You want to make a case for this being a masterpiece. Must Have Been Blind, The River, Happy Time, unbelievable. That this is, Chase the Blues Away. Then it goes into Cafe. Cafe is utterly magnificent. It is the most intensely quiet of the intense quietude of this era. The thundering silence is the most thundering on this song. The lyrics are absolutely beautiful, and this is, again, this is some serious fucking late night listening. This is some seriously pensive listening, contemplative listening, and the other thing is Lee Underwood lets loose with a guitar solo that is, it feels like the most production-y touch. I don't know if it's effects. I don't know what exactly is going on there. I say unamplified, but he is plugged in. He is playing electric guitar, but it's not distorted, or it's fitting for a jazz ensemble. It's fitting for a blues ensemble, and there's not sort of really rock or folk moves being made on the guitar. But he delivers a guitar solo that it feels the most production-y, or if there is some sort of effect on it, it feels like it is underwater and backwards, and it is some warped from another dimension fucking guitar solo that just totally, utterly stands outside of time and is absolutely magnificent. No disrespect, but I feel like, and I don't know if he was an influence or not, would have had to have been. Was his name David Roback? I forget the fellow in Mazzy Star. I feel like everything he did on the slower Mazzy Star songs was trying to recreate this. I mean, it is otherworldly, and in a song that is already otherworldly, and another sort of condensed epic on an album full of condensed epics. This is outside the outside, and I it's absolutely beautiful, and it might be the single greatest thing that he ever played on a Tim Buckley album. It may be his ultimate shining moment, as a instrumentalist, as a guitarist, or as I should say, as a musician. Amazing, and then we go into Blue Melody, which ties it together even more from Chase the Blues Away and Happy Time, because this is another song about music itself and about the effect of music. So tying it into Happy Time, but where a melody does find a rhyme. But Blue Afternoon, I am going to put up there on the board with Buzzing Fly and the Monkees version of Song of the Siren. So as we make our way through these videos, and you're interested at all in becoming a fan, Blue Afternoon is one of, Blue Melody is one of the absolute ultimate stunners. It's one of the major jewels of his discography, of his body of work. And if Chase the Blues Away, and another reason why it ties into Chase the Blues Away, if Chase the Blues Away goes into the blues and leads this genre that is Tim Buckley music into the blues, and is an exploration of the blues, yet not really of the blues, but the spirit and the soul of it, absolutely. Blue Melody does that then for jazz, and this should absolutely, utterly be a jazz standard. It's a modern jazz standard. It's absolutely, utterly perfect. It is hard to, kind of like with Buzzing Fly, it's easy to critique, it's easy to talk about things that you do not like. The things that I love, and one of the sort of mostly fun challenges of doing these videos, and I tend to focus on things that I like in these videos, as you might have noticed by now, that the challenge to myself is to try to talk about these things in a critical way. But what the real challenge for me personally is that in my life, music, and especially music that I love, I have a really uncomplicated relationship with. I have a very uncomplicated relationship with the Beatles, right? I just purely love them. So when I listen to them, I have the experience of listening to them. When I watch that, Jimi Hendrix Isle of Wight concert for the nth time, I simply love it. I don't think about it very much when I listen to Funkadelic, or when I listen to the Stooges, or whatever. Anything that I really, really love it's just a pure, it is a pure love relationship. When I listen to James Brown, or I could name names all day, and it's very, very, very pure, and I'm just totally locked into that, and I don't think about it very much. So doing these videos is a big challenge for me to actually think what is it that I love about these things, and what is it that draws me back in time and time again. Why do I stay up late listening? Why do I wake up early to listen? Why am I late for work because I had to drive around and listen? All of that. What motivates all of that? And so, talking about a song like Blue Melody is, fuck, what do you say? And so it really is a jazz standard. It is otherworldly. It really does feel like it could be from any number of decades. And I know sometimes I say like it sounds how this looks. It sounds how this looks. Like it is otherworldly. It is that shade of blue. It really is the blue melody, except it's a song within a song in that sense because it's something that his mother would sing to him, which I'm sure she did, given that he grew up in a house that had so much music in it. And but what Tim does with it, because it's not like a stylistic pastiche, and it really is a much deeper statement of the self and a statement of the soul. And speaking of which, the line in there that when I talk about how how there isn't catharsis with Tim Buckley, that you are just in his world and you really are kind of outside of time. And these albums are powerful enough that they really, I'm going to make yet another David Lynch Twin Peaks reference, that these albums really are change the color palette, because it wouldn't be the harsh red, black, and white, but change the color palette to something softer and warmer. That these albums really play as what the music is in the Black Lodge or in the waiting room. Like it is that otherworldly and that outside of time. Both time as decades, or the time that it was made, in that it's timeless, but outside of feeling the minutes go by. Short songs feel as long as some of the long songs in a wonderful, wonderful way. So Blue Melody, when he sings, there is no pain that can cleanse my soul. I mean, I feel like he's getting down right to the core of where he's at, and what, the hellhounds on his trail, the stones in his pathway, again, to use Robert Johnson language, and which is some of the richest language of all, is it not? American heritage stuff, bedrock stuff, right? And so, and now I'm going to talk about myself a little bit. You know, I got really into Tim Buckley later in the later 2000s, early 2010s. I've talked a lot about what the middle of the 2010s were like for me. And this sort of languorous, kind of endlessly melancholic, not sure what to do thing is, these were therapeutic for me in ways that and empathetic for me in ways that I will never really ever be able to fully express. And when I started seeing a therapist, for the first time in my life, because I had seen other therapists before, but I actually got a diagnosis. I had never gotten a diagnosis. And I actually received it because it had to be submitted like for insurance purposes. And I saw the paperwork. And I actually, for the first time ever, had been diagnosed with something. And I went and looked it up, and for anybody who's ever been diagnosed with psychological stuff, it's I forget what it is, but usually it's like there's like 20 characteristics, and you have to qualify for like 4 or 5. That's usually like a strong 4 or 5 out of the 20 qualifies for the diagnosis, right? And I might be getting the ratios all off here, but you get what I'm saying. It's a percentage of the whatever of whatever symptoms as it's presenting as. And what I was diagnosed with was like, I don't know, like 16 or 17 or 18 out of 20. I mean, it was like, I was like reading this list of traits, and I was like, oh my God, that is truly me. And it was weird because it was like all this stuff that I felt was like this, like these like existential battles within myself that I was never going to be able to conquer. Or that I would periodically try to rouse myself to conquer. It was like, no, there are actually pathways for this. This is you aren't alone in the jungle hacking your way through the bush with a fucking machete and hoping for the best, hoping there's not a fucking rhino on the other side of it, And there are actually pathways for this. You can drive down the highway instead of hack through the bush. And that was pretty amazing for me. And so I've been able to, like, I'm not saying it's fucking easy or it goes away. That's actually the whole point, is you understand that it doesn't ever go away. But finally understanding that, no, you aren't going to conquer this, you also understand that you are at the same time, you are no longer burdened with it or burdened by it, and that you can have a little bit of a remove, and that you aren't just subjectively in your own fucking jungle, and that was pretty amazing. And this album in particular, I listened to a whole hell of a lot during that period, because it was a place where it was no longer something, I was no longer doing battle with it. It was a place that I finally understood that this is a thing that I go to. And it was also no longer the Kurt Cobain thing of I miss the comfort of being sad and not knowing what to do when things were going well, and sort of panicking around that and thinking that you were going to somehow like lose your emotional core or your soul or whatever the fuck it is. So yeah, the fact that Tim Buckley was able to put this into a lyric and put this into music is incredibly, incredibly powerful, and incredibly, to me, all this stuff leads to healing. It really does. It doesn't lead to the end, and you aren't giving yourself, you aren't harming yourself further. You aren't hacking into yourself. And that's one of the things that I think is so important about art and about music and all of this stuff. And one of the reasons I just think that it is so vital, because you need to understand all of these things about yourself, and you need to sit in the lodge and see all of these different things play out and hear yourself speak backwards. Which, by the way, I don't know if you know this, but Einak Cobb's Draw Cab, I can speak backwards. I actually literally can speak backwards. So my little party piece that I do sometimes, I might do a whole video backwards someday. No, I won't. But yeah, so you need to be able to do that, and you need to be able to be at peace with all of your selves. And so in the same way that I think David Lynch hit upon like an amazing way of understanding that in film, I think that, Tim Buckley is doing that here. It's all of these selves, and you are seeing all of them, and they are all sort of expressing themselves at like the highest level and the most poetic, free form level. So this is very, very, very deep, powerful, incredible music that I think is fearlessly looking into the psyche, and trying to figure out a way to get somewhere from that. And so yeah, you can see why I consider this a masterpiece on the level of Happy Sad, and why I hate that it's dismissed comparatively to what came before and what came after. This is equal, and like I said, if you have somewhat more conventional tastes, or if you just are a person who likes jazz and or blues, like this maybe really should be your starting point, So anyway, so we get that out of the way, okay, and then we go into. So I mean that Blue Melody is one of the greatest songs ever written. It's the contrast to, it's the shadow to the light of Buzzing Fly. I mean, this is just tremendous music. I mean, this guy's a fucking genius, and he's like, again, every song is another development of this genre. And then we end it has to go somewhere. It has to lead somewhere. So in the same way that we had Gypsy Woman, this is a leading to the next stage. So we end with the train, and the train really takes its time. Lee Underwood does some wild improvisational stuff that kind of really goes into like atonality and really goes into almost like early Fugs or like Shag's like non-musical playing. Like he risks sounding like he just doesn't know what he's doing. And then clearly he knows what he's doing, but like, so he has the guts. So there's the congas, Collins on the congas, and just the sheer propulsion of what they're doing. And again, I mean, the fact that it's not rock music, but that it's that propulsive and that it's that rhythmic and that it's that fucking relentless. It is the train. And then you have, you have Tim, who is pushing his voice, and then, but like I said, so the whole song is just like a hair or so under 8 minutes. But it just, he waits until he starts going into the absolute upper register of his voice and pushing himself, and again going into that sort of Pharoah Sanders kind of just raw expressiveness, just pure sound and pure voice as the instrument, and totally just untethered from anything and just freely expressive. And it feels dangerous and scary, and it feels like he's physically hurting himself at various points. Minimal lyric. I mean, it's like a blues lyric, and then stretched to its fucking logical sort of end point somewhere out there in space. And I guess it's the closest there is to a cathartic moment or ending on one of these albums. It feels like there has been some sort of psychic shove off that has been achieved, and the band being able to expand and contract with each other that freely, that they were able to be as cohesive as they were on Must Have Been Blind or Chase the Blues Away or So Lonely, but then they're and obviously Blue Melody, but then that they're able to be as expansive as they are on The River or this or Cafe. Like, unbelievable. Like, it's just phenomenal music making. And this is them. This isn't editing, this isn't production, this is just them. These are the sound of these incredible human beings at such a ridiculously high creative level. And so this album, easily a masterpiece. These are all masterpieces, and there are times where this is my favorite, and certainly you can't. I mean, Blue Melody alone is unbelievable masterpiece. So that wraps up this album, and then we're gonna come in hard and fast with the next two albums out of the mid period, the quadrilogy of masterpieces. But as for this video, that about wraps things up here. And like I said, we will be back very soon with the next two albums, and then I have lots of stuff planned for the rest of December and then January. So it's a fun time to be making videos, and we've picked up a couple more subscribers, so I'm really excited about that. I had never entertained the possibility that I would get to 100, but 100 is starting to seem like it's realistically like a thing, like it is possible. So I've been thinking about doing a 100 subscriber special. So as we get a little closer, I don't want to get too crazy just yet, but yeah, so that's really cool. So welcome, and and like I said, I will be back soon with the next video. I hope that you've enjoyed this one, and As I've said many times now, all of the YouTube things, please like and comment and subscribe. And if you are a Tim Buckley fan, I would love to hear what your favorites are and what you think of his music, his incredible fucking music. And if you've never heard of him, hopefully this video has inspired you to go check him out. And like I said, I'll be covering the next two in the next video. So until next time, thank you very much for watching. And yeah, I will see you in the next video. So bye!